Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all the dignitaries, Honorable Chair, and the esteemed speakers for this session. I am Christina Kujur, the moderator of this session titled Income Inequality and Universal Income. The discussion in this session delves into the potential of universal basic income to overcome income and wealth inequality in India. Now, without any further ado, we would like to welcome our esteemed chair, who will be joining us online, and the panelists on the stage. Let's welcome our dignitaries with a huge round of applause. Professor Sukhdeo Thorat, Professor Santosh Mehrota, Professor Krishnaraj, Professor Babu Matthew, and Professor Arun Kumar, who will be joining us online.
Sir, you want to sit here or here?
As you like.
Wherever you want. Yes.
Now I would like to invite Mrs. Manga to give the panelists with a token of appreciation. We will start from Professor Santosh Mehrota.
So let's get the two. Sorry.
They are not looking at us. They are.
Yeah, chair. He will be doing only for 1 minute. And Arun Kumar will come.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We are listening.
Krishnaraj.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We are hearing you.
Krishnaraj, now he is standing.
Yes, sir.
She is mute. We are not able to listen to her.
Is it? Thank you.
Sir, am I audible?
Sir, are you audible? Hello? Professor, sir. Hello?
Sir, am I audible?
He is doing something now.
Hello?
That was also the problem yesterday because this
Sir,
is not. This is in the
Sir.
open, I think.
Acha.
This is.
Sir, we can hear you, but I don't think you are hearing us.
Hello.
Where is that person? Technical person? See, he is unable to hear our conversation. Okay. Good morning. Sir, can you hear us, Professor Arun Kumar? One way ಆಗಿದೆಯಾ? Yes. Is calling someone else. Unmute. ಇವ್ರು ಅನ್ಮ್ಯೂಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. Good morning, sir. Professor Arun Kumar. Good morning, sir.
He can't.
Professor Arun Kumar, are you able to hear us, sir?
Can't.
No. They will fix it, I think. But ನಮ್ದು ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಬೇಕಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Hello, sir. Hello. ಇಲ್ಲ ಚೇರ್ ಅವರೇ ಚೇರ್. Hello? Hello? Arun? Hello? 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 Come on, come on.
Hello?
It's not heard, sir, from the...
No, yeah, the voice from the meeting is not coming. I can hear Professor Sukhdeo Thorat and he
Okay.
can hear me.
Yes.
But we are not able to hear from the main auditorium.
Yes, sir, we are fixing it, sir. Please kindly
Okay,
wait for
yeah.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the mic was muted.
Yeah, I think so. Mic is muted or what? No? Okay. Christina, can you speak?
Should I continue or
1 minute, you speak. Whether they hear us, let us see.
Professor Thorat, are we audible?
Professor Thorat, sir? Hello? Professor Thorat?
Hey, check.
Hello?
Hello, check. Hello.
Hello?
Check. All right, now.
See, yesterday was also the same problem in the team 1.
Check. Hey, check. Hello, check.
See, they are not hearing us. Oh. Yeah. Professor Thorat, hello? They cannot hear, no? How they can, I can ask them to speak. Okay.
I think in the open they have difficulty in getting Wi-Fi.
Could be.
Yeah.
Check. Hi, can you hear me now?
Professor Thorat, can you hear us now? Professor Thorat? Professor Arun Kumar?
Check. Mr. Arun Kumar and Mr. Sukhdeo, can you hear me?
I'll manage time.
One piece of paper.
Yes.
Just one. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Check.
Recording in progress.
Okay, I think now they've connected to the audio.
Good morning, sir. Professor Thorat? Hello? Hello? Can you speak from there?
Professor Thorat, are we audible?
Yeah, now you are audible.
Professor Arun?
Yes, I can hear.
All right.
1 minute. Sir, can you hear us? Professor
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Okay. Shall we go ahead, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Announce it.
We'll be felicitating our panelists with the token of appreciation.
Madam, thank you.
Professor Krishna Raj, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Thorat and Professor Arun Kumar,
So,
Thank you.
we welcome you, sir.
Yeah, we will collect later. Yeah.
we will send it to you, sir, both Professor Arun Kumar and Sukhdeo Thorat.
So kind of you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So as we proceed, I would like to take a few minutes to introduce our esteemed panelists for this session. Professor Sukhdeo Thorat is an esteemed Indian economist and educationist, is renowned for his expertise in the field of B.R. Ambedkar studies. His illustrious career spans academia and public services. He has served as the chairman of UGC and director in the Indian Institute of Dalit Studies. He is also the chairperson of the Board of Governors at the Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bengaluru. And his scholarly contributions include extensive research on Dalit economic rights and social justice issues. His accolades include the prestigious Padma Shri Award and the Dr. Ambedkar National Award. And he'll be the chair of this session. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Santosh Mehrotra is a prominent development economist, educator, and policy advisor with a rich academic background, including studies at the New School for Social Research and Cambridge University. Professor has made significant contribution to various fields such as labor, employment, skill development, and human development. He has served in key roles within the United Nations, the Government of India, and the academic institutions. Notable achievements include his leadership in drafting chapters of India's 5-year plans, his pivotal role in the National Vocational Education Qualification Framework, and his contribution to policy initiatives addressing rural development and poverty alleviation. A prolific writer and commentator, Professor Mehrotra's work has been widely recognized internationally, reflecting his dedication to advancing social and economic justice. We welcome you, sir. Professor Krishna Raj is a distinguished professor at CESP ISEC with expertise in environmental economics, ecological and resource economics, and urban economics. He holds a PhD in economics, specializing in environmental economics from the University of Mysore. He has contributed significantly to understanding and addressing environmental challenges, particularly in regions like the Western Ghats and the Himalayas. He has also undertaken collaborative research projects internationally and held visiting scholar positions in prestigious institutions worldwide. Through his teaching, research, and advocacy, he continues to make meaningful contribution to the field of environmental economics and sustainable development. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Babu Matthew is a distinguished professor and a co-director of the Center for Labor Studies at the National Law School of India University. With a background in law and social activism, he has been actively involved in addressing issues related to bonded labor, child labor, and the rights of marginalized communities. He has served as the country director of Action Aid International in India, focusing on implementing a human rights agenda with a special emphasis on economic, social, and cultural rights. His expertise lies in the intersection of law, human rights, and social justice, making significant contributions in both academia and practical activism. His extensive experience in social movements and academia underscores his commitment to advancing human rights and promoting social change. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Professor Arun Kumar is an eminent economist, commenced his academic journey at JNU in 1984 and retired as Sukhmaya Chakraborty Chair Professor from CSPJNU in 2015. Currently, he holds a Malcolm Edishak Chair Professor position in the Institute of Social Science. His research focuses on inflation, terms of trade, and his book, The Black Economy in India, published by Penguin, have significantly influenced economic discourse in India. His contribution to academia policy and activism underscores a lifelong commitment to advancing economic understanding and societal welfare. We welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
Now I would like to hand over this session to the chair. Professor Thorat, we have 60 minutes and 10 minutes to each speaker.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
morning to all of you. I welcome the speaker and the participant, Dr. Krishnaraj, Santosh Mehrotra, Dr. Arun Kumar, Babu Matthew. Let me thank you for Sorry, there was a disturbance. Am I audible now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. Yes, sir.
This is a session on income inequality and annual basic income approach. Now, I need not reiterate the importance of this topic. Rising income inequality has been a sort of an universal issue. The book of Piketty, which covers USA and Europe, has brought out the concentration of income into few hands. Stiglitz has brought out in greater detail the inequality in USA and the consequences and danger of inequality. And I think even Piketty has written on India. Beside, of course, there are several others who have highlighted the problem of income inequality. And there is an increasing trend. If you even take wealth data, economic survey of 2013, which gives you the ownership of property into building, land and financial deposit and other things, the inequality comes out, immense inequality comes out quite clear. Or if you divide the consumption expenditure data from NSSO as a substitute for income by quantile, the inequalities scare you really. The top 80 to 100%, 100 bottom or top quantile almost corner the 70% of the income. Now, given these inequalities, we expect from this speaker, who are very eminent speaker, to reflect upon this inequalities, consequences, and an alternative which is suggested that can we have some policy whereby we guarantee and sort of a basic income to the poor so that poverty can be eliminated and everybody at least can have some basic income and level of living. This is the major focus of this. Dr. Krishnaraj has given a liberal time of 1.5 hours for this session. I will request you if you can speak for 10 to 12 minutes.
Yes, sir.
So that we can have 1 hour for discussion, 1 hour for presentation and another half an hour for discussion. There will be many people who would like to have a clarification. Santosh Mehrotra, then we come to Arun Kumar, Babu Matthew and then Krishnaraj.
Yes, sir.
Krishnaraj is one of the organizers also.
Yeah.
Santosh Mehrotra, I invite you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you all for coming to this session, and I want to thank the Karnataka government for inviting me all the way from New Delhi. I want to sort of begin by telling you what are the 3 things I want to say to you in the next 10 or 12 minutes that I have. The first thing that we should focus on is how can more equality be achieved, more income inequality be achieved through jobs and through livelihoods. The second thing is what the Constitution has to say about this. And I'll mention 2 articles in the Constitution, and then very quickly I'll move on to the sort of 2 substantive things that have relevance today to enable our youth to get jobs. One is a right to apprenticeship, the other is a right to a social security. So let me begin by what the Constitution has to say about the right to work and the right to livelihood. So according to the Constitution, the right to life, which is guaranteed by Article 21, includes the right to livelihood. I think all of you need to understand this, that although this is not stated in the Constitution, cases since 1947 have actually enabled the Supreme Court to establish the right to livelihood is a part of the right to life, which is guaranteed, which is a fundamental right guaranteed under Article 21. The court has also guaranteed the right to, has said that the right to life includes the right to live with dignity, the right to a clean environment, the right to health, and the right to privacy. Now, the right to livelihood is a fundamental right in the Constitution. So, in other words, the right to have a job, to have a livelihood, is part of the fundamental rights which we can actually ask the state to ensure. But there is an additional directive in the Constitution that you should all be aware of, especially all the young people sitting here, is Article 41. Now that's not a fundamental right, it's a directive principle. And what does it say? And this gives basis for what I'm about to tell you about the need for social security. What does the Article 41 say? That the state shall make effective provision for securing the right to work, to education, and to public assistance. And what does the article say about public assistance? This includes the cases of unemployment, meaning you could be entitled to unemployment allowance, to old age pension, which is an inherent component of social security or social insurance. It includes sickness and disablement, which is another dimension of social insurance and social security, and in other cases of undeserved want. So I've established for you that the Constitution actually, through Articles 21 and its interpretation, and Article 41 guarantees you what every state government and the central government is supposed to guarantee for you. So it is in many ways your right, and you should go out and seek it. However, what about the reality? For equality to be achieved, what we need for the young people who are getting better and better educated as our country has grown is not necessarily growth of GDP. What we need is is jobs. The obsession with a $5 trillion economy, with a $10 trillion economy that is constantly being sold to you is not guaranteeing you jobs. And in fact, I would argue, and as I've argued, if you follow my work in the media and in my academic work, you'll find that I've argued that the last decade has been a lost decade in terms of jobs. We might have had GDP growth, but inequality has increased, and jobs are not growing, as I will now prove to you with some numbers. This decade has in fact been a decade of lost jobs. The first thing you want to know, which many of you may not be aware of, is that all workers, the majority of workers want to leave agriculture. For 15 years, from 2004 to 2019, before COVID, workers were leaving agriculture in massive numbers because non-farm jobs were being created. This slowed down after 2014, the number of people who were leaving agriculture was 5.5 million per annum every year between 2004 and 14. This slowed down until 19, and then it got reversed. It's not just that there was reverse migration in 2020. There was reverse migration in 21, in 22, as a result of which 60 million people were added to agriculture in the last 3 years alone. That means we've completely reversed the achievements of the preceding 15 years of people leaving agriculture with jobs being created in industry and services. That's one set of people who need jobs. The second is the 5 to 6 million young people who are joining the labor force because they are graduating and coming out of schools. That includes a lot of girls, and the girls are doing very well in education. The third group, of course, is the stock of unemployed. In 2012, you had only 10 million unemployed. That number has grown, had grown already before COVID to some 30 million, and that number has increased significantly. So there are three groups for whom jobs have to be provided now. But the economy is not growing at the rate at which jobs can be provided. So what do we need now? That's what brings me to the right to apprenticeship. Every young person who's completing class 10 or 12, or is getting a certificate or a diploma or a degree, should be entitled to a one-year apprenticeship. Now, how do we guarantee this? First of all, the 1961 Apprenticeship Act actually enables this to happen. Every young person, whether between the ages of 15 or 18, or between 18 and 23, under two schemes of the government, is entitled to an apprenticeship in a registered company. Public sector, private sector, that doesn't matter. Small scale, large scale, that doesn't matter. If the India Alliance of the Congress Party in the forthcoming elections asks for a right to apprenticeship for 1 year, not an unemployment allowance at this point. And I think it's very important for you to appreciate the difference, because an apprenticeship for 1 year will provide a pathway to future work. Young people, when they graduate, they don't find work, they can't get work because organizations and companies don't want to hire them because they don't have any experience. If, on the other hand, the apprenticeship is an entitlement, then they have a pathway to work. For more senior students, for apprentices in larger companies, the government already gives about 25% of the stipend, and the remaining 75% comes from the company. For MSMEs, which have not been hiring apprentices at all, the government should think about providing 50% stipend, because that will enable number of apprentices to go. Would you believe it? And this is my last point about apprenticeship before I turn to Social Security. You have to understand that Germany, where apprenticeship is guaranteed for all young people, they have, in their 80 million population, 6 million apprentices. In our country, under the 1961 Act, after 65 years, in a situation, force of 570 million, we have only 500,000 apprentices. We can turn this around. We can turn this around. Let me turn to my other point, which again comes out of the directive principle that I was talking about, the right to Social Security. Would you know that 91% of our workforce is informal, doesn't have any Social Security, doesn't have an old age pension, doesn't have a right to accident insurance, meaning in the case of death and disablement, and women don't have maternity benefits as a right. 91% of our 570 million workforce. There is a way of providing this. No government in the last 70 years has thought about this seriously. It is perfectly possible for us to provide this. It will cost no more than 0.69% of GDP. I've estimated this. And why is this so important at this juncture of our development? Because we are running out of our demographic dividend. Our dividend began, and we have been a young country, but we are not going to remain a young country forever. In 15 years, before 2040, our dividend is running out. Because our dividend is running out, we have to ensure every single working person has a right to social security. If in the next 5 years, we ensure through a non-contributory mechanism, social security for all the poorest people, the casual workers, the landless workers, and so on. I have a whole schema of things. If you follow my work, there's a whole blueprint written out in this regard. And in the following 5 years, we can provide for the remaining 70% through a contributory mechanism to which the state can contribute. So this is possible. The blueprint is there. It's for our governments to take this on. If we don't, by 2040, we will become an aging society, and what that will mean is people will live longer, but without any old age pension. They will have to end up working till their last days, till they drop dead. That's a dreadful prospect. Let me close, and this is my last point. Why is this so important at this current juncture? It's not just that as we age, we live longer. We have to provide for the proper health services through the public system across the country for all these people who will be aging, not just for all the young people, but as they age, their numbers would have grown. So, of course, we've got to provide for quality health and quality education, but we've also got to provide for social security. It would interest you, in my closing remark, for you to understand that in Europe and North America, between 1880 and 1980, over that 100-year period when they were developing countries, over that period when they were developing countries, the size of their state, the size of public expenditure to GDP grew and grew and grew. It rose from about 10 or 11% of GDP to about 45% of GDP. And do you know what drove that public expenditure, the size of the state? 3 things: health expenditure, education expenditure, and social transfers. That's the role of the state, and that's the way forward for eliminating inequality in the future in our country. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rajiv Mehrotra. You have placed the issue in front of the audience. Began with the contradiction between the Constitution and the actual reality. Very, very disturbing trend of reversal of workforce in agriculture in the last 70 years or so. And so make a suggestion to have a sort of universal apprenticeship, formal labor with a job and social security, especially the health security with increase in the life expectancy, and finally the need to increase the public expenditure on transport and other services. Well, I thank you. I now invite Arun Kumar, Professor Arun Kumar from former Professor JNU, and my colleague to share his view.
Can I share the screen? I have a PPT, but I'm not enabled to share the screen. So let me proceed without the sharing of the screen. So what I prepared is this title is Rising in Economic Inequality in India, Causes, Consequences and Remedies. And what I'll be presenting will be very brief, but I've written a lot on this topic. So it's there in my books and my articles in the recent times. What I've been arguing is that India is a very complex society with huge diversity, which is more than even Europe. And what is principally, the focus that I have is that we are characterized by a vast unorganized sector. It's about 94% of employment is in the unorganized sector, with agriculture employing 46%, that is roughly about half of it, and the rest is in the non-agriculture unorganized sector. And vast number of these people have low incomes. Recently, the e-Shram portal has been set up by the government, and the Prime Minister said 30 crores are registered in it, and 94% of them report earning less than rupees 10,000 per month. and that's close to the poverty line. So in other words, poverty is still very widespread. And even during the pandemic, we saw the Azim Premji's survey of 2020, which said 84% workers lost income during the pandemic, and 90% of them said that they did not have money to buy even 1 week of supplies. So in other words, the situation is quite dire. A large number of people are close to the poverty line. Even if there are a few rupees above the poverty line, it doesn't mean that they're well off. Now, what we have to do is we often get confused in discussing inequality because, as Professor Thorat pointed out, we have consumption inequality, income inequality, and wealth inequality. And there's a hierarchy amongst them. The wealth inequality is greater than the income inequality, which is greater than the consumption inequality. And that is because people at the lower levels don't have adequate incomes, they have to borrow, so their consumption is more than their income. But at the upper level, the savings propensity is very high, so therefore the incomes are much larger than the consumption. And that's why income inequality tends to be higher than consumption inequality. And wealth inequality comes because it's out of savings that the wealth accumulates, and that's over a period of time, and therefore wealth inequality tends to be higher than income inequality. Now, recently we've had data from Price survey on the incomes, we've had data from the World Inequality Report and the Credit Suisse, and all of them point to the really large disparity between the richest 1% and the bottom 60%, and so on and so forth. But let me say that this data is largely from the white economy. It does not include the black economy. If we include the black economy, then the income and the wealth disparity becomes very high because the black economy is concentrated in the hands of 3% of the population. Not to say that others don't earn, but it's bulk of the black income generation, which according to my 2016 EPW article is roughly 62% of GDP, that is concentrated in the hands of the top 3%. So therefore, the income inequality and the wealth inequality becomes much greater than what the white economy data suggests. Now, also we need to worry about the different kinds of inequality in India if we have to do something about it. We have the first divide between the unorganized sector and the organized sector. Then we have the micro sector as opposed to the small and medium in the MSME sector. The micro sector is the 99% of the MSME sector and 97.5% of the employment of the MSME sector. So this vast gap between the large sector, the small and medium, and the micro sector, that is also a cause of inequality which need to be addressed. Then we have the split between agriculture and non-agriculture, then between urban and rural split, then the caste and community divide, and the regional divide. In other words, there are different dimensions of inequality that have to be taken into account if we are to address the problem of inequality. Unfortunately, what's happening is that the government is aggravating this divide. What the government is doing is it's going for supply side economics rather than the problem of demand side which exists in society. So supply side economics means that you give concessions to businesses as opposed to creating demand at the lower levels, which will then boost production. It also results in very small amount of money spent on public services. And what we see is that the government's capital expenditure is largely on capital intensive areas or concessions to the businesses rather than to the employment generating areas like, for instance, rural employment, the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, or education and health, which could generate a lot of employment. So the focus of the government is to promote big business at the expense of the marginalized. The other problem that has been created is that there's policy-induced crisis in society. We did demonetization in 2016, structurally bad GST, and then the sudden lockdown. So we've had 4 shocks in the last 7-8 years, which have impacted the unorganized sector unduly, which has been going down. And that has become a cause of growing inequality. And that's why people talk about the K-shaped growth of the Indian economy. Then the black income generation has continued to rise in spite of all the attempts by the government, various steps taken. And the signal for that is that our direct tax GDP ratio is hardly changing. If the black economy had been dented, then what would have happened is that the direct tax GDP ratio, which has hovered between 5.7% and 6.2%, would have risen to 10 to 12%. But that has not risen, and that implies that in spite of everything, our black income generation continues. The impact of black income generation is that it is like digging holes and filling them, and therefore there's activity without productivity that results in the rate of growth of the economy coming down as compared to what potentially it could. and therefore the employment generation becomes much less than what it could be. Unfortunately, what has happened in India is that we've had a top-down policy right from independence, but after 1991, especially after 2014, the top-down policy paradigm has actually been strengthened. So what we are doing is we are depending on trickle-down, and trickle-down has been inadequate because of the technology factors and other government policies that have been prevailing. One other aspect which is very important in this context is the philosophical aspect of change in society. What society has undergone since 1991 is what I call marketization. What marketization does is to marginalize the marginal sections further and depend on businesses. It brings down the public sector and leaves it for the market. So the debate between state and market has shifted in favor of markets, but markets don't cater to the poor people, to the marginalized segments, and that results in greater inequality as a result in the economy. But there's an even bigger challenge that comes from marketization. Marketization is based on the idea that market principles should operate in society. So every institution then comes under the marketization purview. And that has led to us believing that we are all rational individuals maximizing our gain. When it is a question of rational individual maximizing our gain, then what happens is that social considerations become less important. That's why today equity and equality are not on the agenda. We are only talking about efficiency rather than equality and equity. Another aspect of the marketization is that more is better, and more is better underlies consumerism. And consumerism has become a way of confusing the public because goodies are available, so therefore the real issues go to the background, and what comes forth is the idea that we can consume more and that will improve our welfare. So in a sense, the spirit of independence movement, which was there till the 60s or 70s, that has declined, and the collective has become weak and the individual has become strong, and that's why there's atomization, growing atomization in society. Now, as a result of all these policies that have been pursued since 1991, even the World Bank felt that these policies did not help the poor, and that's why they were talking from 87 when Jolly and others' book came out about creating a safety net. But safety net is no solution, it's only a palliative. So in India also we've gone in for safety nets, but that has not created the jobs that Santosh was talking about. It does not solve the problem of the poor, because without incomes, what do? You don't consume, and therefore the rate of growth of the economy slows down. I have 3 graphs which I wanted to project, but I think because we're not able to do that, so therefore I'll just leave those graphs out for the moment. Now, as a result of the policies that are being pursued by the government, there are 2 circles of development in the economy. The organized sector employing 6%, producing 55% of the output, is growing at the expense of the unorganized sector, which employs 94% and produces 45% of the output. So in a sense, what has happened is that the unorganized sector has got invisibilized both in data as well as in policy, because the government feels that the rate of growth is good and therefore we don't need to do anything further. Now, in that case, what happens is that the marginalization of the marginal becomes greater, and that then leads to further increase in the inequalities. If you look at the RBI data on consumer confidence and capacity utilization, you realize that the economy has not recovered back to where it was in January 2020 before the pandemic. The capacity utilization is still at about 73.6% as per the latest surveys, and the consumer confidence is at 92.2. So these have not recovered back to where it was, and that's what is setting back our growth. We have to focus on the nature of investment and technology in the economy. The investment is going largely into the organized sector. So for 6%, I did a paper in 2008 showing that for 6% in the organized sector, 80% of the investment is going, whereas for the 94%, only 20% is going. And in agriculture, which is 46% of the employment, only 6% of the investment is going. So this results in a pattern in which the productivity is much higher, automation and mechanization is much higher in the organized sector, and that is not creating jobs. We can see that all around us, whether it be in banking or in trade. For instance, in banking, we don't need to go to a bank branch. We can do our work through the computer, through the net. We can go to ATM for cash, so we don't need to go to the bank branch. As a result, the bank's work has increased by 1,000-fold, but the workforce has become half. Similarly, in the trade sector, we are dependent much more on the e-commerce, which is much more automated than the neighborhood store, and therefore there's a displacement of labor there also. That's why people are now talking about job loss growth rather than even jobless growth. Earlier people were talking about jobless growth, now it's becoming job loss growth because the focus is on the organized sector, which is marginalizing. Technology is displacing labor even in agriculture with more tractors, harvester combines and so on. Now the employment elasticity in agriculture has also dropped since 2000 to almost zero. So therefore the problem is employment, as Santosh very rightly pointed out. And what we need to do is we need to change this structure altogether. In fact, globally, the rich have been asking that they have to pay more taxes. So George Soros, Warren Buffett, etc., in 2012 gave a call that they need to pay more taxes so public services can be given. In fact, I remember that even Henry Ford, when the the T model was produced, mass-produced first in 2011, he said that unless my workers can buy my car, what's the point of mass production? So he was talking about higher income, greater employment generation, so that the demand in the economy could be, much greater. So in a sense, what all this points to is a lack of social justice in society, where employment and agriculture have been marginalized. Farmers have been protesting, and as Santosh said, large number of people want to leave agriculture. Quality of education is very poor. It's based on rote learning and alienation. And that's why the Asar reports that have been coming, recently it showed that the people between the age group of 14 to 18, how large number of them, 40% of them cannot do the second class reading, writing or maths. So we need to focus on education, we need to focus on agriculture, and above all on employment generation. In our report that we released in 2022, we showed that 24 million children are ready to enter the job market every year. What we are providing is only 500,000 jobs in the organized sector. The rest have to go into the unorganized sector, and that's why the unorganized sector is not decreasing. And we pointed that there are 4 kinds of unemployment, and together they amount to 278 million Indian children who don't have proper job. So full employment, has to be a focus of the economy. Otherwise, the problems will continue, the disparities will grow. I think Gandhi can be a guide to creation of this full employment and to reduction of inequality in society. His principles, non-violence, last person first, praxis, voluntary poverty, etc., could be a good starting point for us to focus on. And to conclude, inequality is a societal and structural feature. Very often people think it's natural, but it's not natural. It depends on the structures of the economy. Demonetization, GST and lockdown broke the back of the marginalized sections. Today, the financialization, digitization, formalization are going to further marginalize them. So we need to address the issues of unorganized sector. We need to address the issue of agriculture and check the black income generation. We need to address the gender issue because women have been marginalized in the job situation, and the inequality is very great as a result of what's happening to them. We need to focus internally and not primarily externally, but autarky is not what it is. So in our report, we have given the alternative, how to create more jobs, how to make it a macro rather than a micro thing. Government needs to stop being in denial about marginalizing growth. Safety nets alone will not do. Universal basic income will also not do because that does not give dignity. Work gives dignity, so I think we need to focus on employment generation even more than just giving temporary relief by giving some income or by giving some income in the hands of the poor. We need to tackle the problem collectively, and that is strengthen democracy. Then the voice of the poor and the marginalized will be in our policy making, which is not the case at the moment. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Dr. Arun Kumar. I think it's a very, I really appreciate your effort by covering the nature of inequality, nature of growth, and even at the end you have made suggestions. I will have some point to share on this presentation at the end in my chairman's remark, but to briefly mention that the main message from Dr. Arun Kumar is that we have gone back to the growth alone approach. And the growth, poverty reducing growth, which had come in early 2000, inclusive growth, socially inclusive growth, pro-poor growth, that approach had been given bypass by the by the present government. Thank you very much. I'll make some point later. Now I invite Babu Matthew to share his view.
Good morning to Professor Thorat and Professor Arun Kumar, and happy to be in this panel along with friends who are already on the stage. At the outset, I must congratulate the Government of Karnataka for this extremely valuable initiative. Of course, when one says that, one is conscious of the fact that, we have all awakened to this tremendous need a bit late. When the Constitution was in force, all of us took it for granted. Perhaps it was dealt with only in the classroom and in the courtroom. But so far as the public were concerned, they enjoyed the benefits of the Constitution, but it was taken for granted. And therefore, no such an initiative as the type that we are now experiencing was available. At the very outset, I want to rely on Oxfam's report on inequality. The fact that Oxfam has lost its registration under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act is a conclusive proof that they are talking about very uncomfortable truth, especially to the Government of India. 1% of the world's richest have more than twice as much as the wealth of 6.9 billion people. India, top 1% holds 26% of the national income. Top 10% holds 77% of the total national wealth. 73% of wealth is generated in 2017 went to 1% of the people, and 670 million people saw only 1% increase in their wealth. That's the reason Oxfam is not liked. Oxfam is placed on the same footing as Assange, who is now in the jail. But there's an important recent development. Dollar millionaires and dollar billionaires in G20 countries, numbering 216 millionaires and billionaires, they have signed a letter addressed to the Davos Economic Forum, and they have said that their taxes should be increased. They've gone to the extent of saying that they are proud to pay more. It's a very strange thing that while in society there was very little consensus about progressive taxation, here are those who have benefited from this unfortunate wealth making are coming forward. It means they can no longer defend the manner in which they have contributed to inequality. I think it is important to reflect on the constitutional scheme. But may I draw the attention of this audience to the Constitution as it was. Painfully, I use the past expression. And the Constitution as it is. The Constitution as it is very different from what it was. The de facto old Republic of India has collapsed. We are locking the stable after the horses have bolted. Even about the Constitution as it was, please don't equate universal basic income with a constitutional scheme. I want this to be registered by this panel so that further inquiry into this proposition is carried out. The Constitution of India deals with right to nutrition, right to education, right to employment, right to maternity leave, right to living wage, right to health, right to dignity. Not all of them together, but all of them separately. And that is the scheme of the Constitution of India. It's not the right to universal basic income. The new directive principle of state policy, which may arise in the days to come, probably they will prefer universal basic income, because you can then do away with the old directive principles of state policy. In this regard, I wholeheartedly endorse Dr. Amartya Sen's statement. Dr. Amartya Sen says the easiest way for the government to abdicate its responsibilities is to subscribe to universal basic income. I think this must be taken note of. Who are the guys who support universal basic income? They must all, if they are on the right side of India, have second thoughts about it. At a global level, because America is very fond of universal basic income, it is supported by Milton Friedman. You all know that Milton Friedman belongs to the Chicago School of Economists, and they are unapologetic supporters of neoliberalism. What do they say? If there is a problem with the economy, they will say you must have more of the market, and that's the way forward. Interestingly, in Europe, in fact in Germany itself, there is another school called the Freiburg School, and the Freiburg School has said that you can't leave the market unregulated. They are for the market, but the market needs to be regulated, and they call themselves ortho-liberalism. I think it's useful to contrast neoliberalism with ortho-liberalism, and I would subscribe to the opinion that the Indian Constitution is closer to ortho-liberalism and not to neoliberalism. Please look at our experience in India. We have had the Right to Information Law. We have had the National Food Security Act. We have had the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. We've had the Forest Rights Act. We have had the Right to Education. All these 5 pieces of legislation are based on constitutional law principles, and each is a separate legislation to address a particular problem. You did not create one law for universal basic income and forget the specificity of each particular problem. All are a product of civil society processes. It was a product of bottom-up law, and those of us who are familiar with law can see the difference between these 5 laws and other legislation. But the government doesn't like it. They have already killed the Right to Education Law, the Right to Information Law, and the Forest Rights Law. The remaining 2 will be killed if UBI gathers further momentum. The National Food Security Act has 2 aspects to it. One is subsidized ration for those who are in need, though where self-selection may have been a better principle, but that aside. The other principle is minimum support price has to be paid because of the farmers' agitation. It's not because the government loves the farmers, but because the farmers have the wherewithal to protest. They successfully defeated the 3 anti-farm laws. And they are not extending PDS out of love for the poor, because if you have to procure minimum on the basis of minimum support price food grains, then you must distribute it, and that will naturally go for the poor. But if basic income idea flourishes, they are saying this is because of corruption in all the other schemes. Corruption will now shift into who is below the poverty line. That is going to be the basis of universal basic income scheme. And who will decide who is below the poverty line? You will have corruption rampant, and I think it is the people who are close to the ballot, too close to the polling booth, the Panch Pramukhs, they are the ones who will decide who's below the poverty line. So that is a very sad state of affairs. It is reported during the year 22-23 that food subsidy came to 287,000 crores. Fertilizer subsidy came to 255,000 crores. The total subsidy, 562,000 crores. UBI scheme at the rate of 9,400 per month for a family of 5 people, for 50 million poor people, that will be much lesser. And this is a trick in order to remove all the other welfare schemes that are available, and in the name of direct benefit transfer, you will have a new state of affairs. And that's the first step to perpetuate inequality. And so I think we must take note of the warning that Amartya Sen has given. I think we need to inquire more about Jean Drèze's views in this regard. But what is it that can alleviate income inequality? The steps that are required, first of all, make sure that the need-based minimum wage is paid to all those who deserve it according to well-established principles. For lack of time, I won't elaborate on that. Secondly, then the minimum support price must be made available to the farmers who are now carrying out their agitation. Implement the Swaminathan Committee report. Swaminathan has spoken about C2 plus 50. There's another dimension to it. A2FL must be added to it. And I won't go into the details again for lack of time. The third and related thing is use the same principle as the MSP formula of C2 plus 50 in order to fix the price of petty commodities produced by the self-employed people of India. Finally, there are 4 labor codes in India which has already been legislated. They deal with social security, ESI, EPF, gratuity, maternity, and the old workman's compensation. But all that is confined to less than 7% of the organized workers. 93% don't get any of this social security. We all know that if there is a person above the poverty line who gets hospitalized, by the time he comes out of hospital, he would have fallen below the poverty line. Informal workers must be given the benefit of ESI and EPF. It requires very small amendments, but it requires great amount of political will. All wage workers are already receiving contribution from employers, and that should not be given up. So far as unorganized workers and the self-employed are concerned, that ESI and EPF must be extended to them, and there has to be a state contribution to that. So what we need is need-based minimum wage according to the principles laid down, which will be roughly double what it is now. Then there should be fair wages for those who can afford to give fair wages. Then there is the minimum support price and the extension to petty commodity production, along with the core labor standards of the ILO supported by the Constitution of India. Therefore, there is a constitutional approach to address these inequalities, but I beg to differ and say that is not through universal basic income. That's the agenda of neoliberalism, and we must not get co-opted into that trick. Thank you.
Thank you, Babu Matthew. You have brought out the constitutional provisions with respect to the right to nutrition, health, education, and job. Also the provision in the directive principle. Point out the approach of marketization, market focus approach vis-a-vis the state focus approach, and then they made a number of suggestions which are very important. Lastly, now I invite Professor Krishnaraj, who is also one of the organizers of this panel and the earlier panel.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, one and all. Professor Thorat, my co-panelist. My previous speakers, they have covered almost all the topics under income inequality and universal basic income. I just want to take you away from some of the other issues that really matters for our existence itself. So Indian economy is facing one of the worst kind of income inequality among other problems we are having, which include inflation, unemployment, and cost of living is increasing. But most importantly, one of the worst problem we are facing is that environmental degradation, and every one of us are depending on environmental resources. These resources have been degraded, and the policy of the government is to promote economic development at the cost of environmental degradation. The macroeconomic policies pursued by the government in recent years is to promote income and GDP growth rather sustainable development. For example, in recent times, the Government of India is aspiring to make India a 5 trillion economy by 2027 and also Vikasit Bharat, a developed country, by 2047. If you look at these policies, on the other hand, the government also wants to realize Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas, that is inclusive development. So these policies are contradictory in nature. On the one hand, they want to promote income and GDP growth rate. On the other hand, it wants to achieve inclusive development. They cannot go together because of contradictions in the macroeconomic policies. These macroeconomic policies, particularly, they completely ignore the poor. They depend on natural resources, including forest, including land, water, and biodiversity, and air, and other important resources. They are very important for their very survival. Because of this macroeconomic policy which promotes the demand side management, that is supply side management, in fact, it wants to invest more on infrastructure development, create more corporate type of jobs rather than creating employment opportunities at the rural and urban areas. So whereas in the case of, I want to draw a contrast between the policies of the government, state as well as central government. Whereas in case of state government, it wants to follow the policies of demand side management, where Professor Arun Kumar has informed us, most of the problem with the rural poor is that they have consumption inequality. So Government of Karnataka, in order to enhance the consumption inequality, it has brought out 5 guarantees. These 5 guarantees can also be equated or attributed as one of the form of universal basic income. As a result, every month, each poor family will get 5 to 6,000 rupees as a basic income to make their livelihood. So on the other hand, the Government of India, it is on the policy of supply side management, where it wants to invest more investment in creating infrastructure development. So as a result, it is supporting the corporate sector and supporting the industrial sector. And if you look at the policy of the government in terms of taxation also, the corporate tax is at 22.5%, whereas income tax is at 30%, those who come under the 10 lakh and above. So these are some of the macroeconomic policies that create income, wealth, and consumption inequality. Further, you know that we are facing one of the worst type of climate change in recent years as per the IPCC 6 report. As per this report, the countries will face one of the worst type of natural disasters such as cyclones, droughts, floods, and pest attack, even disease attack. The victims are the poor and vulnerable communities because they don't have economic security to come out of these challenges or risks they face. So there are no support for these communities in the form of social security when they face these type of natural disasters and risk. In recent times, you know that Oxfam report and other reports, they have brought out, even environmental performance index reports, they have brought out that these climate events will be increasing over a period of time. By 2045, the average temperature will increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. By the end of the century, it will reach to 2 degrees Celsius. If this is the situation, the poor and vulnerable sections, they don't have any economic security or economic empowerment. They will suffer from these type of natural disasters. So this will create and enhance the income inequality, even though the government has several rural development and other policies. So this is how the income inequality is increasing day by day over a period of time, and this one of the reasons is also mainly due to unemployment, growing unemployment in agriculture sector, especially unorganized sector and in rural areas. Therefore, as per the constitutional provision, the governments have the responsibility to bring the underprivileged society to the privileged equivalent to privileged society, but these policies mainly helping the corporate and other sectors, not helping the poor. If you look at the GDP development, and the share of GDP is increasing in case of service sector, and in case of agriculture sector and industrial sector is coming down because the unemployment is very high in these sectors. So I want to draw your attention to another important issue is that the sustainable development is the only solution to some of the problems we are facing in India, because India is the most populated country in the world. The resources available in the country are highly skewed towards the rich, the corporate sector. So this needs to be reallocated towards the poor and the vulnerable sections. Then only we can live a society where equity can be achieved. Otherwise, the sufferers will be the rural poor and the vulnerable sections. They continue to suffer under the policies, macroeconomic policies of the present macroeconomic policies. How can we achieve? For example, the government of India wants to realize sustainable developmental goals by 2030. The first and important goal is that no poverty by 2030. How the government of India can achieve no poverty by 2030 when there are no investment on poverty alleviation schemes and asset creation schemes. So these are all the policy dichotomy or policy differentials we are facing, paradoxes we are facing in present situation. Therefore, government should make efforts to bring all these vulnerable sections on par with the privileged sections in the form of providing social security, in the form of providing employment opportunities and reducing their cost of living, ease the inflation, and also provide some basic income like 5 guarantees which have been announced in the Government of Karnataka that will ease their life, and most importantly, protecting natural resources on which the poor are depending, that is more critical to any developmental policy of the government. I stop here and thank you one and all. I think, yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Krishna Raj. You have, along with the point mentioned by the earlier speaker, you have highlighted the role of sustainable development and depletion of the resources. We have to have a development, but it has to be sustainable. I will just make few remarks by way of summarizing what the earlier speaker have said, and then I go to the question answer session. I think 3 points are very important from the presentation. Both Raju Mehrotra and Santosh Mehrotra and Matthew have mentioned that the Constitution has provision for the state to meet the basic requirement of the state. They are income, nutrition, health, education, and also income inequality. So there is a constitutional support to the policy for the state to undertake for the providing a minimum income or basic income or livelihood to the people. They have in fact mentioned each of them. Second point they have brought out is that the constitution also obligated the state to make such policies. And particularly, I mean, it not only gives the rights to education, rights to health, nutrition, livelihood and employment and job, but it also poses a responsibility on the state in the directive principle to develop policies for the well-being of the people. And most important, one of the provisions in the directive principle is that it suggests to the state to develop a growth policy which will not aggravate wealth inequality in such a manner that it became detrimental to the well-being of the poor. Very powerful sentence if you read the directive principle. So constitution is in place as far as the recognition of the right and the responsibility on the government to take an appropriate policy. All the speakers have highlighted, Arun Kumar and others have highlighted the growing income inequality. Now, Arun Kumar made a very important point that the wealth inequality is much higher than income inequality and than the consumption inequality. Consumption inequality is lower simply because people they have to survive, and so they manage the income somehow from here and there. So the income inequalities, wealth inequality and consumption inequality is a problem which is growing over a certainly a period of time. But my only additional point is that all of you have said the person inequality, individual inequalities. The Indian society faces the problem of group inequality. The intercaste inequalities in ownership of wealth, income and consumption, inequality between religious minorities and the majority, and the inequality between the tribal and the non-tribal and the gender. Now you can see that for last 50 years or for 40 years, there is a increase in demand for group-based policies rather than the individual-based policies. The reservation as a group-based policy began in 1931 and later in 1950 among the scheduled castes. It extended to scheduled tribe, OBC, and now there are several subcastes which are asking. Of course, the women got the reservation in legislature, and then it has gone to the extent of income group also. So the group inequality is very important, I think, which we have to recognize, which Oxfam report doesn't deal with. If you take the wealth inequality for 2013, the scheduled castes constitute about 18% of the population. They own only 7% of the wealth, whereas the high caste share in the wealth is much higher than their share in the population. OBC come closer to their population. So I think our society itself is the reason for this disparity. I think that has to be brought it out. The second important point which all speakers have made is that I think particularly Arun Kumar and others have made, that we have gone back to the World Bank and IMF's earlier approach of growth, and that is growth alone approach. Martin Ravilian has used this word, growth alone approach. And that is, this growth alone strategy was based on Simon Kuznets' approach. Simon Kuznets had argued that you focus on increase in the income, that's all. And don't worry about inequality. In the beginning, inequality will increase in the process of growth, but later on, after 40, 50 years, the income will trickle down to the poor. So the trickle down mechanism to the poor was suggested as a method of reducing poverty. Now in the 80s and the 90s, this was not found to be true. In Latin American countries, income had increased, but poverty had not declined as much. And therefore, people began to talk about, in the beginning, what is called inclusive growth. And inclusive growth means, growth should help all. But Kakwani and other came gave the argument that, if increase in the income of all can be called inclusive growth, then all growth will be inclusive. What we need is a pro-poor growth, the growth that will reduce the poverty. No, it is not to say that the income of the economically better off should not increase, but the income of the poor must increase more than that of the non-poor, and at a much faster rate. So there are several indicators of pro-poor growth which are given in by the UNDP, which coined this concept. Now, what is exactly happening today, which Arun Kumar and others are saying, especially Arun Kumar has pointed out on several aspects, is that this limitation was pointed out, and therefore in 2000, World Bank and IMF itself suggested inclusive growth and poor growth. That you have a growth, but see to it that the growth also reaches to the poor. So the strategies of the growth should be such that income of the poor increases. There was an economist called Carlson from Institute of Technology in Bangkok, who took this concept of pro-poor growth one step ahead. And he argued that there are groups in a society other than the poor who are discriminated on the basis of their identity, like caste, race, color, gender. And there may be a growth, but because of discrimination, they may not be able to participate in the market. Therefore, he developed a concept, what is called non-discriminatory growth and disadvantage reducing growth. So, altogether, I have written in a couple of my articles that the pro-poor inclusive growth should comprise of pro-poor growth and non-discriminatory and disadvantage reducing growth of discriminated group. So this is the concept that has emerged now, and in fact in 11th and 12th plan we adopted a strategy of inclusive growth. Congress Party United Government really mentioned clearly and defined the inclusive growth. In fact, Monte Singh Ahluwalia is the signatory to the concept of inclusive growth which was issued by the World Bank in 2000. So this is the second point. Arun Kumar and others have very rightly pointed out how growth has not been inclusive, how growth has been less inclusive, and how growth basically focus on supply side, how to give a lot of incentive to increase in the production and income, but whether that income really, a part of the income, a substantial part of income goes to the poor or not, that is not discussed. You see, in last 10 to 15 years, ever since this government has come to power, have you ever seen much discussion on the inclusive growth or pro-poor growth? No. The only signal point that you see, you hear all the while is growth, vikas, and in income, but not whether the income goes to the poor or not. Only what is being talked about is the scheme for the poor. So we have gone back to the original Kuznets approach to the development of strategy, where we focus only on growth, and we are not concerned with whether that growth goes to poor or not. And in the process, the supply side economics come into play. Then it also focus more on market.
Tissue. Okay, that side.
I think the frame is frozen.
Yeah. So the demand side is not focused as much. So I will end by saying that the number of the participants, all the 4 of them have suggested that you have to have a growth in a manner such that the state must take an initiative. Market must be regulated, markets must be pro-poor, and state must intervene, and they have identified job must increase, employment rate should grow up. There should be formalization of the worker where you get a job security and social security, and provide guarantee of employment. A number of other suggestions have been made by them. Malhotra has made suggestion for apprenticeship and other thing. Small sector should be focused. Agriculture need to be more focused. Agriculture has more worker than their share in the income. How to reduce the worker in the agriculture, but at the same time how to increase their income. The most devastating fact that Malhotra has pointed out is the reversal, the reverse migration leading it to the stagnation in the share of agriculture. There cannot be any other worse thing than that. income is stagnating, but the population is worker share is much higher. Well, these are some of the important messages that have come from this presentation. I really thank Professor Arun Kumar, Mehrotra, Babu Matthew, Krishna Raj, and Krishna Raj has of course highlighted at the end that all these development we should be pro-poor, inclusive of the discriminated group, but it has to be a sustainable development also. The present generation will make a maximum of use and without leaving much for the future. That is also an equally important aspect of the growth. With this, I stop my chairperson remark and go to the audience and they can raise the questions.
Yes.
I ask Krishna Kumar to Krishna Raj to coordinate the question answer session.
Yes, sir. We'll take questions. Any questions from the audience?
Good morning, sir, and good morning everyone present here. Sir, I would like to raise two questions, sir. Basically on the employment and another on the MSP, sir, which the farmers are fighting in the Haryana and Punjab borders. Sir, I would like to start with a saying about by our political science professor that man-made inequalities can be eliminated, but the natural inequalities cannot be eliminated, and the natural inequalities aren't the natural inequalities, but there are the uniqueness of them. Sir, when I come to the employment question, sir, basically in India every year there are many graduates who passed out of the degrees, sir. Like when they come to the employment opportunities, sir, when compared to the organized sector, there are more job offers in the unorganized sector, sir. If they go to the interview, sir, the basically question the private companies ask is that, what is your experience? And when they get into that, and they do not have the social security, sir, when we see that during the COVID time, many people lost their jobs, especially in the private sectors. How did the government respond to it, sir? And when we come to the MSP, sir, in India, we have Minimum Wages Act for the employees. And every day we are alive means the responsible thing is the food, sir. The people who grow the food crops are the farmers, sir. We don't have the minimum support price for the farmers. Remember, sir, if a farmer stops...
Okay, you have made the point. Okay.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Arun Kumar and Mehrotra, would you like to respond to this?
Or should we take some questions because we may be short of time? Let's take some questions and then reply at the end. Maybe that'll be better.
Okay, let us take the questions. Yeah.
Some more questions, if you have. Yeah.
So Dr. Arun Kumar said that mechanization and digitization has actually negatively impacted the unorganized sector. But sir, do you think that digital technology, if used appropriately, can actually help in the formalization and benefit of the unorganized sector?
Yeah. Here.
More questions, Krishna Raj?
Yes, sir. One more question is there. After that, we'll go for reply.
Good morning, respected professors. Thank you for enlightening us. I have two questions. First question is to address to Matthew sir. Second one is to Krishna Raj sir. To Matthew sir, I would like to ask whether what is your suggestion to improve the sector now? Whether the government of India should go back to Gandhian socialistic policies from the neoliberalist policies. If yes, whether it will be suicidal for the nation, but if we are continuing the neoliberalist policies, it will be suicide for the people of India. How will we balance these two competing claims? And to Krishnaraj sir, just like he was pointing out, even we are having so many PhD holders on the street of India seeking for bread and butter. So do you think the new educational policy will empower these people to find an employment which will be sufficient for earning the bread and butter at least? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Professor Mehrotra and Dr. Arun Kumar. First, Professor Mehrotra, then Professor Arun Kumar.
Ready to answer the question?
Yeah, right. Well, let me address the question about 95% of the jobs that are in the private sector and the connection to work experience. So the first thing, and the informality question, because most young people first end up in the informal sector. Let me re-emphasize what I was saying earlier. Currently, the way the education sector is structured, and currently the way the labor market of India is structured, the two are not talking to each other. The education sector is operating in its own world without much concern about the employability of young people. And on the other hand, in the private sector, jobs are not growing. I'll come to that, jobs not growing, in a minute, but first, I think we have to crack the problem of employability being generated through the education system and the transition to the world of work. So, first of all, I think all the speakers have repeatedly emphasized how important it is for the quality of education to improve. Why has that become so important in the most recent period? Because in the last 20 years, what we've seen is a rapid massification of school education as well as higher education. Let me explain what I mean. And as a result of that massification, you've seen a dramatic fall in quality. So employability has fallen. What do I mean by massification? You see, until 1991, when our economic reforms began, 51%, in 1991, only 51% of our country's population was even literate. In other words, half of our population was actually illiterate, some 45 years after independence. That's how little we emphasized school education. Thankfully, in the 1990s, there was much greater emphasis, and as a result of that, by 2007, we managed finally, 50 years too late, to ensure net enrollment rate for classes 1 to 5 of 97%. As a result of that, there was upward pressure in the upper primary, and between 2010 and 2015, we went from 58% secondary enrollment for 15 to 16-year-olds to 85%. That means you got a very rapid massification in a matter of 5 years, 2010 to 2015. What result was, how did that impact the higher education? Higher education enrollment also got massified. In higher education enrollment was only 11% in 2006. In 10 years' time, it went to 27% on a rising base of students. So you can imagine that the number of colleges grew from 10,000 to 42,000 affiliated colleges. And the result of all this is that young people are coming out with certificates and degrees, but how are they going to get employment? Which is where your work experience issue comes in. Which is where my suggestion of a right to apprenticeship for all youngsters who are passing at least class 12 or also a certificate or post-higher secondary certificate, diploma or degree. If a one-year apprenticeship was guaranteed under the 1961 Act, which has existed for over 60 years, then it provides that work experience that is bothering you. Because otherwise, and even after this right to apprenticeship, because formal jobs are not growing rapidly, it's critical that this apprenticeship, which actually enable them perhaps initially to move into the unorganized sectors and then move on to because they'll have that certificate in addition to the schooling. Let me answer the question about digitization. Is digitization leading to formalization? Short answer, no. We may think that it is leading to formalization, but that means we haven't understood what formalization is. There are two types of formalization. One is the formalization of enterprises. and the other is the formalization of workers. Formalization of workers I've already spoken about. 91% don't have any social security, and so I won't say much about that. But let me say a few things about formalization of enterprises. The problem is, as Arun also rightly mentioned, you see 97% of our 66 million non-farm enterprises are unregistered anywhere. They're not just unorganized, they're unregistered. Only 3% of the entire non-farm economy or enterprises are registered and in the organized sector. You may think, reading the pink press and the regular press, that that's what is, that's what's most important. In fact, that's not the most important. The point is, if the government doesn't even register, state governments have not registered them. They're sort of, even the sort of enterprises which are registered, they're under multiple acts, multiple authorities. There's no back-end data. So how is this, the digitization per se, formalizing these unregistered enterprises? The government doesn't even know about their existence. So if they doesn't know about their existence, there's no TIN, there's no PAN number, forget about it. Why do you think the share of personal income taxes or corporate income taxes in our country is so low, and without taxes growing, we can't spend on health, education, or on social security? Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Arun Kumar?
Yeah. So I agree with what Professor Santosh Mehrotra is saying, but I'd like to add, we need to look at the political economy dimension to look at the issue of jobs and to look at the issue of the MSP and the farmers' incomes. The political economy dimension is that the unorganized sector acts as the reserve army of labor, which prevents the organized sector incomes from rising. And the second thing it does is that it keeps the demand in the economy low. And therefore, what happens is that the rate of growth of the economy begins to fall. So that's why if you see in the Q4 of 2017-18, the official figures said the rate of growth is 8%. That fell to 3.1% just before the pandemic, because the demand was inadequate, capacity utilization was low, and therefore investment had come down. The investment had peaked in 2012-13 at 36%. It fell to 30% or thereabouts. And that's why the growth rate fell. So the political economy is that why is it the government wants unemployment and why is it that it wants agriculture prices to be low? The reason is that it wants industry to have cheap labor. If food prices are low, if unemployment is there, then the labor will be cheap. And therefore, in a sense, what Professor Thorat said, the group demand, which in my presentation I also highlighted, that there's a gender dimension, there is a dimension of the caste, there's a dimension of community. So these dimensions, the group dimensions, are also very important because these groups are the deprived groups. So as I said, the e-Shram portal registers 30 crore people, of which 94% say they are earning less than 10,000 rupees per month, which is the poverty line. And large number of people are actually self-employed. So as Santosh rightly said, that there are more than 6 crore units in the MSME. And of the 6 crore units, 99% are micro units employing 1.7%. And what you have is the small and medium and then the large. So there are 6,000 large units, 6 lakh small and medium units, and 6 crore micro units. The problem of unemployment is the problem of the micro units, which have been killed on a very large scale due to the demonetization, GST, and due to the NBFC crisis, and then the sudden lockdown. It is there that we need to revive. They cannot be formalized, because how can you formalize a sector where the average employment is 1.7? You can neither register them nor formalize them. So digitization is killing the micro sector. The other attempts at GST is killing the micro sector. In fact, you can see that the GST has created great inequality, because the poorer states, which have more of the unorganized sector, they have actually declined compared to the better off states, which are the organized sector, which has more of the organized sector. So in other words, the political economy of the whole situation has to be taken into account. And that's why the political economy situation is that we are having two circles of growth. The organized sector is growing, the unorganized sector is declining. Now, that is why the job is a problem, because bulk of your employment is in the unorganized sector, in agriculture, it is in the micro sector, and those sectors are declining. That's why I have called I've said that the organized sector is colonizing the unorganized sector. Organized sector is growing at the expense of the unorganized sector. That's why the unorganized sector data, if it is taken independently, our growth rate is not 7%, but more like 1 or 1.5%. I've written several articles recently showing that if the unorganized sector is taken independently, then our rate of growth is not 7%. Otherwise, why is it that at 7% the unemployment is rising? It can only be because the rate of growth is low and the rate of growth is concentrated in the organized sector. So therefore, we have to see that all this mechanization and formalization, etc., which is killing the unorganized sector, which is killing the employment generation in these sectors where the bulk of the employment is, that is where the political economy comes in. The political economy is to help create conglomerates like the chai balls of South Korea, whereas keeping 80 crore people poor and give them, make them labhartis by giving them 5 kilo of ration, gas, and so on and so forth. So in other words, that's the twin strategy. It's a political economy strategy, and we must focus on the political interests that prevail, where the big conglomerates are getting everything. They're, growing by acquisition rather than by technology. So these are some of the political economy dimensions that need to be taken into account to answer the questions that the students have raised very intelligently. It's a very good thing that the students are concerned about these things. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Professor Matthew?
I'll just refer to the question which was pointed at me and begin by, suggesting that we must take note of the vast majority who have a livelihood option which is going on now. And that is in relation to natural resources, in relation to commons. So if you look at the forest workers, if you look at the fish workers, if you look at street vendors, I think that is the corresponding part of commons in the urban economy. They are having a livelihood, a miserable livelihood, no doubt, but you can't wish it away, and that also has to be addressed. And I think the directive principles that Professor Thorat referred to, particularly Article 39 C and B and C, those also indicate that natural resources must be used in a different manner. So there is, I think, need for multiple approaches. While we are, wanting to find perfect macroeconomic solutions, there is also a huge informal sector which is reality today. And how does one help their livelihood? That also requires interventions. And those interventions will be closer to the Gandhian type in relation to trusteeship and matters like that. Apart from it, returning to the larger question, I think the consensus that is emerging is it's not going to be easy to solve the unemployment problem. I recollect observations by economists like Jean Bremen, who's pointing out that we are now in a new phase of industrialization, and that industrialization simply is not going to absorb excess labor from agriculture. So that question remains. Perhaps some pointers in that direction lie in the critique of the one-size-fits-all approach of the World Bank and others developed in the context of East Asia. Is there scope for such an approach in India, especially given the tremendous crisis that is facing the small and tiny sector of industry? Now the relationship between large sector and tiny sector is a parasitic relationship. In fact, recent conversations indicate from the large sector, we'd like to replicate in each of our factories the same kind of a situation which exists in the economy, meaning we'd like, 6 to 7% formal workers and 93% informal workers, even in multinational companies. So that's the message they are taking up. Forget the question of formalization in the informal sector. What's going on is informalization in the formal sector. So I suppose there is a multiple approach required in order to address all these complexities. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Matthew. You have raised a very important question, new education policy and also the rising unemployment among the youths. Of course, the new education policy came into force in 2020, which aims to create employment opportunities, more importantly through skill development. But if you look at the higher education policy from the particular context, we have established so many private universities. It is promoting more private universities rather than public-owned universities. If you take IITs and IIMs and also state universities and central universities, the faculty strength in all these universities not even filled up to the maximum sanctioned post. So given this situation, the policy and practice are completely divided, and there is no seriousness in implementation of these policies. And further, the skill development in the new education policy, even though it is ushered, but actually the skill development does not promote employment opportunities in the private sector. As already the earlier speakers have mentioned, the skill development required for the industry is not properly understood, and especially in higher education, the skill development is not promoting promoting for employment opportunities. For example, recently we have seen one of the report, the unemployment rate among the master's degree students is highest in India, that is around 43%. So this clearly shows that our new education policy is not aimed at promoting employment opportunities, even though it says like that. Thank you. So with this, we end this first panel of the day, and I request you to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you all the panelists. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all who have contributed to the success of today's deliberation, and a sincere thank you to our esteemed panelists for sharing their invaluable insights. Your expertise has enriched our discussion and inspired us to explore new avenues for the further progress. And I also extend my appreciation to all the participants for their active engagement and thought-provoking questions. And once again, thank you everyone for being a part of this important discussion. We'll quickly take a 10 minutes break and we'll assemble back for the next session.
Thank you, Thorat.
Tea is available outside, so we can.
All the best. You are muted.
Thank you very much for participating, but I also thank the Minister for Social Welfare, who is present here in the audience to listen to the speaker.
Next time you come to Delhi, let's meet.
Yeah, we meet, yeah.
Okay, all the best. Bye.
Bye.